man who has saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you also may believe.
Welcome to Truth Through Testimony. On this show, we will explore God's truth through real-life testimonies. Each week, we will bring you a powerful new testimony showing the amazing works of God. I'm Landy, and with me on this journey are my husband Brandon, my dad Terry, and my uncle Dan. Before we get to today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe and follow us at Truth Through Testimony on YouTube and Truth Through Testimony on Spotify, so you never miss an episode. Welcome to Truth Through Testimony, where we explore God's truth through real-life testimony. Today, I want to take a minute to welcome our guest, Misty. Misty has an amazing testimony. How are you, Misty?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm good. I know you've been sick, so are you feeling better?
I am. I'm getting better every day.
Good. That's awesome. I know there's stuff going around. My husband, Brandon, is really sick right now, so he's taking one for the team today and just
gotten through. I'm gonna do my best.
Yep. So how is everyone? Dad, Dan, how are you guys?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Dan, I don't know how you could not be good in the Florida Keys and the nice weather.
Well, it's a struggle, but you know, I just got a 27 mile bike ride in this morning, so that was good. So yeah, it's nice.
I don't think I've ever rode 27 miles on a bike in my life.
Oh,
To get like total.
Yeah, total.
yeah.
Let alone at one time.
Yeah.
Oh
Yes.
yeah. There you go. Yeah, I've got 230 or something like that miles in since I've been here, so
Oh
Oh,
my gosh.
it's been fun.
Dad, we can't see your weather outside, but I assume it's not like Dan's.
It's a little bit different than Dan's. I have some blue. I have some blue sky.
Yeah, I noticed that today. We have a little sun too, but I think your temperature's the same as ours, and it's freezing.
I mean, the ground is probably similar in color. It's kind of white, which the ground in Florida there might be kind of white if he's on the beach, but definitely
Yeah.
a different texture.
There ain't, one thing that surprises me about the Keys, there are not very much beach on the Keys.
Oh, really?
It's all mostly rock and coral, so which is really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to produce their beaches that they have. They've got 3 or 4 throughout the whole Keys, but
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. Well, before we get started with Misty's testimony, I want to just take a minute and recognize some Messiah moments that maybe we've had the last week or the last few days. So anything that you've seen God's hand in, things that he's done the last few days or the week that you just want to give glory to God for. Anybody want to share anything?
I would like to share. I have been working with one of my son's friends for the last few years and talking to him about God and church. And yeah, he had a lot of things in his past. And he was pretty closed off at first. But yesterday he came to church for the 4th time without being asked and on his own. And so I just want to give God glory for continuing to work with those prodigals that have stepped away from their faith, but he doesn't leave them alone. He keeps running after them. So it's just a really big moment for us.
awesome.
That's definitely a Messiah moment right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, was you gonna say something?
Well, I was going to say I'm hoping that the moment I'm going to speak of is going to be a Messiah moment. It isn't yet, but a lady here that we kind of run around with, her and her husband, while we're down here. They live in Virginia. Their son has 3 kids. 2 of them have, and I can't remember what the initials are of the disease that they have. But there's only 150 kids that have this disease worldwide, and they have two of
Wow.
them. They only the longest any kid that has this disease has ever lived is 10 years old. They just celebrated the 8th birthday of the one kid the other day,
Hmm.
and I think the other one is 5 years old. So anyway, I told her, I said, I want you to write everything down and give it to me. I said, because I'm going to put it on the prayer chain at church. I said, because God can, and she's mad at God because she said, I don't understand why he gave us one kid like that, let alone two. And I said, well, I says, I can't explain what God does, but I says, there's glory somewhere in this path, in this journey. And I says, and I'm just praying that you see that that they are healed miraculously. And I says, and matter of fact, when we was praying the other night, I said, Lord, just totally eradicate this disease from the face of the earth. No kid should go through that because they can't speak, they can't eat, they got to have a feeding tube. I mean, but so anyway, I'm hoping that it becomes a Messiah moment. I'm hoping to get a
Hmm.
phone call sometime and say, "You're not going to believe this," but oh
Yep.
yes, I do.
Well, when you do, we will have their testimony on our show.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Anything for you, Dad?
I've just been really blessed by this, doing these podcasts. I mean, it's just amazing to me that, uh, what we've heard and, just the willingness of people to step up and do this for us. It's just really been a great thing. And
Yeah.
I pray too that God uses this to touch some people and change some lives out there. That's what he does. And
For sure.
hopefully we'll just be an instrument he can use to do that.
Absolutely. Well, we can go ahead, Misty, if you're ready, and just move on to your testimony and just share it with the world.
I want to thank you so much for asking me to join this podcast. I find it an honor and a privilege anytime I get the chance to talk about what God has done. My testimony is one that is just one that I never thought I would give, to be honest. As of September of 2023, this was a daily part of my life. It is how I functioned. And I had a disease called Hashimoto's. And at that point in time, I was on, for those that don't know, Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease. It attacks your thyroid, and your thyroid controls a lot of your body function. And I was on 2 different thyroid medications at this point, a daily antibiotic, a daily antihistamine, multiple supplements, vitamins, turmeric, just anything and everything that I could take to keep my body functioning. And it was had been a big struggle in my life, and the struggle came from more of trying to get diagnosed, and things not going well. So I have been trying to get diagnosed for approximately about 15 years. And I had started in my early 20s going to the doctors and, telling them, I'm so tired. I can't sit up. I can't even watch a movie with my child. He would get so mad at me. He'd be like, Mom, we watch a movie, and about 5 minutes in, I was crashed. And I was just struggling with all these different symptoms. I had lots of rashes over my lifetime that I couldn't explain. The fatigue was really bad. And I go to my doctors, and they'd be like, well, just reduce your stress, exercise, eat better. And that was pretty much the end of it. And it wasn't until I went to one checkup that my doctor was feeling around, and she's like, you have some swollen glands, and I think we might want to take a look at those. And so they ran some scans, and they ran the standard thyroid test, and everything came back normal. And she's like, well, we've got a few small nodes, but, nothing to worry about. No big deal. We'll just keep an eye on it. And this continued on, and I'd go back to the doctor, and I would complain of the increasing symptoms, and they would run the same test and no, you're fine. And eventually she finally did send me to an ENT, and he ran the same tests. And he said, yeah, you have some nodes. He said, but they're not big enough to do anything about. And he said, I just really think your thyroid's not working all the time. It's working some of the time, but not all the time. And I asked him at that point, I had done enough research that I had knew a little bit about thyroid issues. And I was like, well, can I get put on medication? And he's like, no, I don't want to put you on any medication. It's not going to do any good until your thyroid completely quits. So we're just going to keep monitoring for every 6 months. And at this point, the tests were costing me around about $700 each time they would run them. And, you know, it's a young family and don't have a lot of money. I was like, well, if they're not going to treat me, there's no reason to go keep continually spending this money. So I started doing some research, and I found that there were certain supplements I could use, and I reached out to people that I knew had similar issues, and so I started taking some sea kelp, and that helped for a while, and it eventually waned, and I started taking some other minerals and supplements to help, and that eventually wasn't helping anymore either. And I was getting to a point where the symptoms were increasing. My fatigue was pretty bad. My hair would fall out in handfuls. Extremely dry skin. Started getting hoarseness in my throat, and wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. And I was having a particularly bad flare up. And a lady at work seen my rash on my arm, and she looks at me and she goes, "You have Hashimoto's, don't you?" And I said, "Well, from the research I've done, I think I do, but I can't get diagnosed." And she said, "You won't." She said, "My daughter has Hashimoto's, and she tried for years, and American doctors will not perform the correct tests. So she moved to Ireland to get diagnosed." She goes, "More than likely for you to get any kind of help with this disease, you're going to have to leave the country."
Wow.
And I'll admit, I felt pretty hopeless at that point. That wasn't an option for me. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the resources. I was raising a family. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And the symptoms were increasing to a point where it was making it hard to function. And that was, I'm going to say, probably around 2008, 2009. And I continued on, just taking whatever I could find, doing research, changing my lifestyle, going to all natural products, doing anything I could do to try to keep my body in remission, or at least keep the symptoms down. And in 2012, I started noticing that when I would lay on my back, I couldn't hardly breathe. And my throat was starting to feel very swollen all the time. And I knew things were changing, but I didn't know exactly what was going on. I thought it was just, increased swelling, and I just needed to do more to try to manage the symptoms. And I was starting to get hoarseness. Things were definitely taking a turn. And this continued on, and by 2000, I think it was around 2017, I was getting to the point where the symptoms were getting pretty bad. I was choking on my food. I would choke on my own saliva. The hair was falling out more. It's actually the reason why I have curly hair now, is I started perming my hair back then to cover up all of the hair falling out, and the patchiness and the different links. And it was easier and quicker, and I was doing anything I could to conserve energy. My brain fog was getting really bad, to the point where I would think a sentence and what came out of my mouth was completely different. And I would only know it because people would look at me really weird, and I'd be like, "What did I say?" And they'd be like, "The dog is green?" And that wasn't at all what I was trying to say. My syllables would get messed up. My words would come out weird. The brain fog was getting really, really bad. And I finally, through some people at work, found a homeopathic doctor. And when I went into her, I had just decided I'm not even going to mention my thyroid. I'm not transferring my records. I'm not even going to mention my thyroid. My symptoms at that point had become so much, they were mimicking early menopause, and I had just hit 40, or was about to hit 40. And so I just went into her and said, is there a possibility that this is just early menopause? Is that something that we could, investigate? And she looked at me and she said, "Absolutely not." She goes, I want to run some tests. And I said, okay. And I'll be honest, I thought, well, here we go again. Same test, not going to get any different result. But then my heart jumped because she goes, I want to run antibody tests. And I knew that was one of the key tests that I needed. And I was like, maybe I finally found something. And then 24 hours, she called me back and she said, you're in full-blown Hashimoto's. And I said, yeah, I know. I said, I've known for years. And she goes, well, I need to get you into an ENT and we need to run all these tests. And so they started with the scans and the tests, and I went into the doctor's office and I sat in front of him, and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to tell me, yeah, I have nodes and my levels are off, but we're going to get something done. And he looks at me and he says, so I need to do a biopsy on your tumors. And I stopped. Because I was like, how did I go from nodes to tumors? And sorry, I get real emotional about this part.
No need to apologize.
No, you're getting one would, yeah.
He said, yeah, it's okay though, because if it is cancer, it's the best kind of cancer to have. And I remember thinking in my mind, whoa, slow the bus down. How did we go from nodes to tumors to cancer? And he went on to tell me, he's never lost a patient to cancer, and if God gave him the option of cancer, this would be the one he chose. And I'm reeling. I just thought I was going to finally get some medication and treatment. I didn't know I was facing potential cancer. And I just kind of sat there and I'm like, I didn't even really know what to say. And he looks at me and he goes, so how long have you been on medication? And I said, I'm not. And he said, stop joking with me. How long you been on medication? And I said, no, sir, I'm not. I've tried for years. And nobody will listen to me. And I went through the same story I just told you, and he got irate. And he's like, I want names and phone numbers. He's like, because if they would have treated you the moment they found that first node, you'd never have tumors.
Wow.
And that really took me back, because I thought, I've tried so hard for so many years to get somebody to listen to me, and now I have tumors. And I have a son. And I can't have cancer. And I talked to a lot of people, and I got lots of advice. And I even had people tell me that don't tell your husband, just do the biopsy, and if it's cancer, then tell him, don't panic him. And I thought, no, I can't do that. And so I told him, and we scheduled the biopsy. And I went in for the biopsy that day, and the procedure is pretty invasive. You have to be awake for it. And I took 12 needles to the throat in order for them to do this biopsy, and I came out with a huge bruise. And so thankful I did tell my husband. It was I've got pictures of it. There's no way you're covering that up. I mean, it's apparent that you've had something done. And we went on vacation that evening, and they said it would be so many days, and I waited in panic and praying a lot. And the doctor didn't call. And so I waited another day and he didn't call. So finally I just sat at our campsite and just continually called until I got a hold of the doctor. And I'm like, I need to know the results of this test. And they're like, well, it's good news. It's not cancer. But we are going to have to keep monitoring. And if it gets bigger, we will have to completely remove your thyroid, and you will be dependent on medication for the rest of your life. And so from there, I really, really started to be diligent about my medications. We started with one. It wasn't working, so we went to two. The second one was one where I could adjust the dosage. So if I was having a good day, I would take one. If I was having a bad day, I would take three. And this continued on. That was, like I said, in around 2017. And it continued on, and my symptoms would get a little better, and then they would get a lot worse. And I was just really struggling. And in 2019, me and my husband both felt like God wanted us to start a business. But the question was, do one of us, start the business? Do both of us start the business? What do we do? And through a lot of prayer and really a lot of consideration, one of the considerations was if I quit my job and started the business with him, I could then sleep on the way to and from clients, and I could get more rest, and I could adjust my schedule more, because it was becoming harder and harder to keep a full-time schedule. And I'll be honest, I'm a workaholic. I've always ran 90 miles an hour and just done so much. And there was a part of me that felt like that this disease was a way that God was keeping me under control, that I wouldn't burn myself out, that I wouldn't, just run into infinity. And so we decided that we would just both quit our jobs, and we would take this huge leap of faith and start our business. And that way I could have more time. And I would sleep a lot in between stops, coming back and forth. Was just very, very fatigued, very tired. Medications were helping, but not to the extent that they should have been. And I was really getting to a point where it was really starting to affect my voice. And that was very important to me, because worship is just a part of my heart. And I can remember joining the worship team in 2018 and them asking me, what's your range? What do you sing? And I'm like, you know what? I really can't tell you. I don't know, because it would depend on the day. How swollen things were, how much they were pressing on my vocal cords, whether I had range or not. I might be able to sing it on Tuesday and Sunday take an entire different part, because I could not get the range out. And that even came to a point where I was starting to lose my voice. There was 2 instances where I was talking, everything was fine, and then voice just gone, and would be gone for 2 or 3 days. It was really starting to wear on me. And in 2023, we were having a women's retreat, and Friday night was going to be a miracle rally. And I'll be honest, I wasn't even sure I was going to go. I was doing a conference down south, and it was our team meeting day was that Saturday. I knew I was going to be driving 3 hours total, plus the all-day meetings. And I knew that my energy wasn't there, and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to, do a late night worship service, and then, go to that the next day and be able to function, and then church on Sunday. And so I was really debating, and I finally just decided I'm going to go. And we went in on Friday, and we were in worship. And there's 2 other ladies in our church who also deal with autoimmune disease that I'm close to, and I felt like God said, it's time for you to go get them, and it's time for you guys to ask. It's time for you to ask. And that was so specific. It's time for you to ask. And so I went and got River, and I waited for Julie to be able to come off stage, and I got her, and I pulled them aside, and I said, I really feel like it's time for us to ask for healing. And I honestly hadn't felt like I could ask. And so we began to pray, and I told God, I said, God, I'm so tired of being tired, and I'm so tired of not knowing whether or not I can sing or speak or do what I need to do to worship you. And I just want it gone. And we prayed, and you could feel the presence of God. But I also didn't know what it was going to look like. And we prayed, and it was amazing. And we walked out that night, and God brought back to my memory my sister-in-law, who had also dealt with autoimmune, and God had healed her. And one of the things that he had spoke to her was to lay her medicine down. And I told God, I said, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. I'll just walk away from all of it. And I felt really strongly like he said, just stop. Just stop it. And so I went home that night, and I didn't take my medicine. And I woke up the next morning and thought, well, I'm going to try it. And started singing in the shower. And all of a sudden I realized I could sing, and it wasn't impeded, and it wasn't groggly or gravelly, and it was there as soon as I got up. And then I realized I couldn't feel the pressure in my throat. My tumors had gotten so big that you could see them from the outside. You could feel them. You could press and see the bumps. And I could feel them all the time. And I couldn't feel them. And I thought, oh my God, they're gone. And I didn't say anything to anybody. I thought, I'm going to walk this in faith. I want to make sure. And as the days went on, every morning I could get up and sing. Every morning my range was there. Every morning there was no pressure. I wasn't choking anymore. My symptoms were subsiding, and I had the opportunity to see my sister-in-law just a few weeks later, and I pulled her aside and I said, I want you to know I feel like God is doing the same work in me. And I said, what did you do? And she said, anytime Satan tried to even begin to put a symptom on me, he said, I just started rebuking it in Jesus' name and wouldn't let it come. And so that's what I did. Anytime that he started working on my mind or started bringing it to me that I wasn't healed, I would just rebuke him. And I would find myself all the time reaching up and touching my neck. It was kind of like this, they're really gone moment. And I think I even did it unconsciously. I mean, it was just one of those things, like, it was like, it's not there. It's gone. It's still gone. And days and weeks passed, and I didn't really think a whole lot about it. As time passed, it started to become part of my daily life. And it wasn't until we were getting ready for the next the next women's retreat, and I looked at Julie and I was like, you know what? It's been a year. And she's like, it's been a year. And I was like, yeah, it's been a year since my healing. It's been an entire year. And she asked me to give my testimony, and it was so great to be able to get up and tell what God had done. But it was also a healing moment for me again, and I apologize. The tears always come when I tell the story. But it was such a healing moment for me too, because I realized that all that time, God was still there, and he still had a plan. And even though my healing took a long time to even get diagnosed, my healing was for a reason, because it opened up the door to talk to so many others about God's grace and his healing power and the things that he can do, and that he's still there in your darkest times. He's still there when you're walking through it. And it was worth every bit of it, just to be able to talk to people and say, he can heal you too. He's there with you too. And it really helped heal a lot of those hurts that I had from honestly feeling like the woman in the Bible with the issue of blood, when it says she went to the doctors and they made her worse. It was one of those things where it was like, but God had a plan and he had a reason and a purpose. And it's all worth it, because I'm able to give him the glory. And I thank him so much for walking me through that journey, and for healing me, and for being able to get up every day and having a voice to give him glory. And I really just appreciate everything that he's done.
Oh, I was trying not to just fall during your whole testimony. Man. Oh.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, your singing. God gave you this gift, to sing and to be a part of the worship team. And then when you thought maybe you would never sing again, how were you feeling at that moment? How did you get through that? I mean, I know myself, I would be mad at God. I can see how people get mad at God for things like that. Was that you, or what were you thinking?
I have been singing ever since I was little, and there was a time I didn't sing because I had gotten embarrassed when I was little. And by the grace of God, my grandma always knew what I needed, and she would just bribe me to sing. She would pay me to get up with the kids' choir, and she always knew that it was a part of me. And I really felt like I have her mantle. My grandma was a worship leader. My grandma wrote over 100 gospel songs in her lifetime, and so there was a part of me that was really sad, because I wanted to sing. I wanted to be able to do that, and was very intimidated, especially just being around so many wonderful singers. I had God had been working on me for a long time to get back to praise team, and honestly, I just felt intimidated. I was like, God, I can't, not with this voice, not with the caliber of people that we have and the talent, and I'm like, I'm not worthy, and I can't with this voice. And I wasn't mad about it. I was just more sad. And I felt like if that was something he was calling me to do, he'd help me do it. But I really just didn't feel worthy. And honestly, still don't. I mean, I'll just be honest, still don't. But it's something that's so much a part of me. And so there was this sadness. It was kind of like grief. And I would still sing around the house and get out what I could. But it was also kind of scary each time, because it was like, I don't know what it's going to be like today. I don't know if I will be able to sing. So it was just kind of a roller coaster of emotions. And through it, God had been working on me. He had, as a teenager, he brought somebody to me, and he had told me, he said, God's telling me that you want to sing. And he's like, I want you to anoint your throat every day. And okay, I'm a teenager, and I didn't follow directions the greatest back then. I might not follow them the greatest now, but I didn't do it. I'll be honest, I did not do it. And so God had brought that back to my memory before my healing, and I hadn't told anybody, but I had started anointing my throat every day. And we were in a worship service, and I wasn't singing that day. I was in the back, and a gentleman that I've never seen, never met, I don't even know if I've seen him since, turned around to me after service, and he said, I want you to know God has a place for you to sing, and that you have a gift, and I feel like your gift is going to help people. And I thought at that time, because I was on praise team by this point, I was back on praise team. I thought, well, that's great and odd at the same time. I didn't know what God was about ready to do, and I was like, okay. And I said, nobody knew I was anointing every day. And he goes, God told me to tell you need to thank God for your voice every day. I said, okay. And he walked away. Well, it was just a few, maybe days or weeks later, I get a phone call from the conference that I was actually, that I spoke about, that I was going down to join their board as the music director. And I thought, okay, God, is this where you're wanting me to go? I mean, I still wasn't healed at this point. And I was like, all right, well, by faith, I'm going to do it. And that meant, sometimes as the director, you're the one up there leading, and sometimes you're putting the teams together, but, it's an obligation. And I thought, well, by faith, I'm just going to do it. And so I did. I didn't know where all of this was leading me. He was continually working on me, that this healing was coming. And it's just one of those things. God does work in mysterious ways, and it's not all the time sudden, and sometimes it's a journey. And that's really where it was. It was just a journey.
Doing these testimonies, we're hearing a similar thing with faith. By faith, you have to take those steps,
Yep, for
Yeah.
sure.
Sometimes it's not a step, it's a leap, right?
Yeah. A jump off a cliff.
Yeah, sometimes it's just leaping off the cliff.
Yep.
So are you still off all of the medications that they had you on?
Yes, I'm not on any prescription medications.
Wow.
I do still take my vitamin D3 and my B12 when I can remember to take it. I'll be honest, I'm not really great about remembering it anymore, that I don't have to do it every day. But those are two vitamin supplements that are pretty crucial to body function. And especially in Indiana, we don't get a lot of the D3 because of the lack of
Yeah,
sunshine.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I do still take those two, but all my prescription medications and all of that, I've quit.
I'd say that's a win. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
I know there are a lot
Very
of naysayers when it comes to the power of God's healing. Have you seen a doctor to follow up on anything about what's going on, or is it just I'm going to go with God? I believe I'm healed. I'm fine. I don't need to know.
I have not seen a doctor. So part of this also comes back to during COVID, my homeopathic doctor was let go of the network, and also my specialist that I had been seeing was also released from that network, and my ENT before that had retired. So I kind of been stripped of all of my doctors, and that was one of my things before I got healed that I was worried about. I'm like, I don't even know where to find new doctors that are going to listen, and
Yeah.
so through my healing, I've just been just totally trusting on God. I haven't
Yeah.
been back to a doctor. Honestly, don't plan on it. I mean, it was one of those things. I know a lot of people would probably like me to go back and do the scans and things, but honestly, I know they're gone. You can, I mean, the skin is still a little stretched from all of the years of them being there, but you can't see them, you can't feel them. I know they're gone, and so by faith, I'm just walking with God.
Well, you found a better doctor.
That's
I
right.
believe so,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, your testimony touches home because my wife has lupus, so which is another autoimmune disease. So,
My sister-in-law had lupus and myasthenia gravis, and so I'm very
no, yeah,
familiar with the walk of those diseases. And honestly, I tell people I don't have it, or I didn't have it, nearly as bad as people with those type of autoimmunes. Their symptoms are so much worse.
yeah,
Hashimoto's is bad, but it's not nearly as bad as what they face every day. But I know if God can heal me, He can heal them too.
yeah, for sure.
I find it, I mean, it's not really odd. I think it's more of a divine intervention that you were healed and then your doctors were let go from the network. So, maybe God knew you weren't going to have these doctors to rely on.
There you
So,
go.
Well, actually, my doctors were let go before my healing. Yeah, so they were let go before my healing, and I had actually ran out and got all of my prescriptions, filled as many refills as I could possibly get, because I was so afraid I was not going to be able to find a doctor who would prescribe them. And so I have a box full of medication that I've never taken, where I did run out and try to get everything I could get, knowing that they were being let go.
Yeah, you just gonna probably keep that box as a reminder. I would anyway.
That was one of the things I felt really strongly about once I was healed. I felt like God said stop the medication, but I also felt like he said keep it because you would need it later. And what I found was when Julie asked me to give my testimony, I had forgotten about it. They were buried in my kitchen cabinet, and I
Yeah.
felt like God said go get them out. And so that was one of the things that I felt strongly about, was to have them as part of my testimony of what I was taking before He healed me.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing all that with us. That's quite a story.
yeah.
That will definitely touch some people.
I hope so.
Yes, it will.
So, it took all this time for you to get diagnosed. And I can't imagine what you were feeling at that point. I mean, and you probably didn't know that you would be healed at that point. So, how were you getting through all of this? Was there a certain scripture that got you through a lot of it? What kind of prayers were you praying? I mean, how do you go all those years and not have your faith shaken and just, like I said, not be mad at God?
For me, because God had healed me before. When I was 16, I was having gallbladder issues, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on there either. And it was to a point where I had negotiated with my doctors that if I could, keep my eating right and not have any attacks, they wouldn't do surgery. They wouldn't move forward with some of the invasive things that they were wanting to do. And I had honestly kind of gotten cocky, and I had a meal that I really shouldn't have had, and I went into a gallbladder attack and was in the floor. And they wanted to take me to the hospital, and I said, no. Tomorrow is Sunday. If you will just let me get to church, I'll get prayed for. And if God doesn't heal me, I'll go on, and we'll have the biopsies and the surgeries and all of that. And I went the next morning, and I went up for prayer, and I was like, I really need healed, and God healed me, and I've ate anything and everything I wanted ever since. So I really trusted on that child's faith of knowing that he had done it before, and that he had always been there. And I think that's why I didn't get angry with God, is because I had seen him do it early in my life. And that just really kind of kept me there. It's like, God, I know if I'm walking this, you're still there because you were there before. And honestly, I blamed myself a lot. I hadn't taken care of myself. Like I said, I always ran 100 miles an hour. And that's one of the things that I told God when I got healed. If you'll heal me, I will start learning to take care of myself. And it's, I'll be honest, it's still a battle. I still am learning self-care. I am still learning how to take care of myself. But honestly, I blame myself a lot for it. And I leaned on his scripture that he says, it's in Jeremiah, where he says, I knew you before you were born. I have great plans for you. I just always kept that in my mind, that no matter what he made me walk, and I walked a lot of things in my life, that he has a plan and purpose for it, even when I don't understand it. And there was times I got angry. I'll be honest, when that doctor told me that if they would have listened to me, I wouldn't have tumors, I was angry. And not at God, but at them. It's like, please, if you'd have just listened.
Yeah.
But I just kept trusting that he was going to be with me no matter what, and just each day trying to put one foot in front of the other and kept pushing. And honestly, I'm just so thankful he gave me that warrior spirit. My dad said I've been like this since I was born, and I don't ever take no for an answer. I just keep pushing. And so I just really think that's God-given trait that just kept me going every day.
Oh, man, it's God's timing. You had to go through it for a long time, but it's all in God's timing. And I just, that childlike faith, I love that. I think we lack that a lot of times, is the childlike faith.
Well, I was just going to say that reminds me of something that your pastor said a while back in one of his sermons. He said, "Don't get out of the healing line. No matter how long it takes, don't get out of line.
Yep.
You just never know."
Yep. It may take a day, it may take 100, it may take years. Yep. Well, what I'd like to do now is pose this question and see what kind of answers you guys may have to it. I know a lot of Christians ask this question. Dad, I know we've talked about this before, but why are there so many denominations of Christianity? And did God intend for there to be so many?
Well, I guess I'll go first here, but I've struggled with this one a lot, and I've told people before, I said, I get to heaven, this is a question that I want to ask God, because I've always wondered, why is there so many different churches and denominations of Christians? And I think I've come to a little bit of understanding this week, doing a little bit of research and reading some stuff. And, God gave us free will. He didn't force us to do anything. So we have our own thoughts, our own opinions on things. And, even, godly people even are still flawed people. So, and you can put 10 people in a room and have them watch something happen, and you probably get 10 different descriptions of what happened. Everybody has their own opinions on things, and I think that's probably where this comes from, a lot of it. People, you can read the scriptures, and like say you have 10 people read something, and them, you're going to get several different opinions on what that meant on subjects like taking communion and baptism and stuff like that. And so I guess I've kind of settled into that. I think it's just people's differences in people's opinions on things. And uh, I have to assume God knew this was going to happen. you know,
Yeah.
uh, supposedly he knows everything, so he had to know this was going to happen. And so I guess he's okay with it. but anyway, that's what I come up with. Or
I noticed that too. A lot of the things we're saying, it's interpretation, so many different interpretations of the
yeah,
Bible.
yeah,
Well, and we even have different. We can read a scripture one day and read it again the next week and have a different interpretation of it because of something that we need in our lives.
that's right.
So, even when we can't maintain, a level like that, then you can't think, everybody else. But I, it's funny. Well, not funny, but you got like I went to Church of Christ before I came to our church, and they didn't believe in instruments, and so they sang a cappella and just sang the hymns. And I was very involved in music and everything. And so when I came to faith, it was like, I was like I walked through heaven's door because, they had instruments and they sang. Although back then they were singing hymns, but we sang, like we sang one song that may have been on the radio or whatever back then. But and you got the talk about speaking in tongues and interpretation of tongues, and so some churches don't like that. So they,
Yeah,
you just got so many variations, and it all does end up being an interpretation because only God knows what's perfect. And but I think the bottom line is if your church believes in Jesus Christ is the only way for salvation, then the other stuff is secondary. You
That's
know.
what I read. Someone had said, um, most denominations share core beliefs: Jesus, Bible, and salvation. They practice their faith differently. So as long as it's all, everyone believes the same things, they just practice their faith differently.
Yeah.
I've
yeah,
been really privileged to work in organizations that are cross denominational. And that's very different because when I was growing up, I grew up in a very legalistic sect of denominations. And I would go to church with my friends who were different denominations, and that wasn't always looked on the greatest. And so when I got older, I just kind of decided that I didn't share that view and that there was lots of things that I could learn from other people. And so working with cross denominations is a challenge because everybody does have their own interpretation, and you walk a fine line between making sure that everything you're doing is scriptural, but also not treading on how people practice out their own faith. And so what I have learned, though, is there's so much we can learn from each other. There are some denominations that just really, truly have hospitality down to a fine art, and they're wonderful at it, and they have grasped what I believe that the Bible talks about as being hospitable and those kind of things. And there's other religions that's really got worship down really well, and other denominations that have figured out the teaching part. And I really think sometimes, and I don't ever want to give Satan credit for much of anything, but I think sometimes he uses that to keep us from really learning from each other. Because if we ever really learned everything that everybody else has figured out and all were able to come together and know all of that together, we'd be unstoppable. We would truly understand the
Amen.
power that God has given us. And so I think there's a little bit of that in the mix as well. But I do agree a lot of it just comes down to our own humanity and our own interpretation in the way that we all see things differently, and the Bible talks about praying for your understanding, and everybody's at different levels, and everybody understands things at different times. It's just like growing up and learning through school. It's building blocks. There's times that people have come to me with things and said stuff, and I was so offended, because I wasn't ready to hear it, and it took me some time and really getting into the Bible to go, oh, you know what, they're really right. I didn't have that right. They understood it better than I did. So I think there's a mixed bag of reasons on why we have so many denominations.
I agree. And oh man, if we, like you said, if we could all come together as one, what would happen? I mean, I think that's why Satan does spend a lot of time trying to keep us all divided.
Yeah.
Well, we are all going to come together one day.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
What a glorious day that will be.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yep. I read during doing some research on this too that a lot of kings and rulers often influenced the formation of new branches of Christianity. The missionary movements and revivalism, that had a lot to do with it too. And political and cultural influences. They had to adapt to local culture and governments too. I have a scripture I would like to read that I think says quite a bit. And again, it's from 1 Corinthians. It's 1 Corinthians 12, 4 through 6. And it says, there are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them, in everyone, it is the same God at work. So
Yeah.
I feel like that says, yes, that, God knew that this was going to happen, that so many different denominations were going to come into play, but it's all one God. No matter how you worship or how your faith practice is, it's one God.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to come back to Jesus. I mean, and that's if you look back at Billy Graham over all the years, everything he's done. He preached. He had one message he preached all them years, and that was Jesus Christ. That was his message.
Yep.
Yep.
And if we stick together on that, I think we'll be all right, no matter
Yep.
what else we think.
That's what my Bible says.
Mine too.
I'm pretty sure mine does too.
Yep. Yep. Well, Misty, we thank you so much for being willing to be on here and to share your testimony. I know that it's going to touch many lives, and thank you for showing the vulnerability and the strength and just giving God the glory.
Thank you so much for inviting
And
me.
I just want to thank everyone for listening, and we pray blessings and favor over your lives. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.